Welcome to the Nicole Osei Report. I'm Nicole Osei, and today we're going to be talking about the current economic climate, financial literacy, starting your own business or creating a new career for yourself, and just making sure that your finances are solid moving forward. And I'm honored to be joined today by the founder and CEO of the proposed Bank of Jabez, ReShonda Young in Iowa. Welcome.
Thank you, Nicole. It's good to be here.
Oh, yes. And again, I wanted to talk to an expert. So I'm very glad that you're on. You have a very fascinating story with decades of experience in business and finance. You helped run your father's business for 9 years. You
Yeah.
also started a gourmet popcorn chain called Popcorn Haven, grew that to several locations, I believe six, and then sold it in 2019.
Yes.
And in 2020, you were among a group of women and minority business owners who sued and won their case against the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau for failing to ensure that they enforce the laws that ensure banks didn't continue these types of discriminatory practices. So, you've got a wide range of experiences in business in terms of the good and the bad and the pitfalls and how to get over them. Can you talk about what led you to embark on opening the bank?
Yeah. Actually, even before I started working for my dad in my early 20s, I started looking at real estate. So I became a landlord and real estate investor in my early 20s. And so it's really that story that's kind of really important with why I ended up saying, okay, all right, a bank, that's what I'm doing. So, like I said, in my early 20s, I started buying real estate. Shortly after, well, I won't say shortly, decade or so after that, ran my dad's companies. And seeing just from myself with the real estate to working and running my dad's companies, and he'd been in business for maybe 16, 18 years. I don't remember when I started working with him. And we were doing multi-millions of dollars of business running through one of the larger banks, or one of the largest banks. And access to capital it was difficult for myself as a landlord, real estate investor. It was difficult for him as a person who'd been in business for, almost 20 years at the time I started working for him. But what I was seeing was that the white male friends that I have who are also real estate investors were not having the same problems that I was having. What I saw when I started working with my dad's company was that other businesses that were run by our white male competitors that we were also friends with, they were not having the same issues that we were having. As a matter of fact, one of the gentlemen still is running his company, and he saw how difficult it was for us to get access to capital, as well as to get contracts at the same rates that they could get them at with these larger companies that we were contracting with. So he would bid and get the contracts and then subcontract with us, and it would still pay us more than what these companies were willing to pay us. It was just all
Mm.
kinds of bad, crazy stuff. So fast forward to the popcorn years. I started Popcorn Heaven back in 2013, and ended up, like you said, franchising it out to other locations. And so all the other locations up until the last one were all other Black individuals who bought into the company. So when I ended up saying, okay, I'm running my store, I am doing way too much, trying to help with the other stores and launching, businesses around the country, actually, I'm just going to sell my store and work on helping, other people. So as I did that, and I sold my store to a white female who did not have any experience with running a business, nothing. Um, she was able to get for my business. Now, the bank had said to me, "No, we can't do this. We can't do that in terms of financing." Well, she was able to walk in with my exact business plan, my exact financials. Basically, just her name was on there, and she was able to get more than double what the bank told me that they could not get for me. Now, that was one thing, and all the things that I had seen in terms of discrimination in, the decade before that. But then the thing that really got me was in 2019 when I had gone to one of the banks I've been working with for 7 years. When I started working with this particular bank, um, one of my good friends was a VP at the bank. And he had said, ReShonda, you guys are having a lot of trouble that you should not be having. Come and work with us. We'll do good by you. So I go with, my real estate accounts, take my dad, so they can look at his things. They actually, like, when my friend was there and the the commercial loan officer that worked there with him, while they were there, I mean, I was able to do all the things that my white male investor friends always talked about they could do. And I was shocked with the things that were opened up to me because I had an in with my friend there. So my friend and the commercial loan officer ended up leaving. And when I reached out in 2019 and said, hey, it's a small thing a small loan that would have been super easy when my friend was there. Um, the new banker, he says, because both of them had left by then, the new banker says, ReShonda, we don't want you here. We don't want you at our bank. If you decide you're not going to move your accounts, we will foreclose on you and take everything you own. So that's why the real estate part is important, because I own quite a few properties at that time that had a lot of equity in them. And I was just like, are we really having this conversation in 2019? And how are you going to foreclose on me when, first of all, I'm not behind with you? Um, and I've done nothing wrong. Like, where's this even coming from? And he's like, oh, don't worry about it. We will foreclose on you. And it was one of those things. And he says, and yeah, my boss says that you're threatening. I was like, threatening? What are you talking about? I don't even know your boss. Like, I don't even know who this person is. But to me, that's code for a Black woman doing too much.
Oh, yes. We know what that word means.
It was code for that. So they spent the next 16 months doing some very illegal things and trying to make good on their promise to take everything that I owned. Even the house that I'm sitting in right now, that also, they had a lien on that. And it really was because I had some connections with the media and a whole lot of prayer going on, that it ended up, they ended up having to basically undo everything, or else it was going to be exposed very publicly, with their name mentioned in USA Today. So they came, once they figured that I was going like super public with them, they immediately came to a settlement offer and like reversed all the illegal things that they had done. But it took 16 months of stress and me fighting to save like all these things I had worked so hard for. So with that, it was just a prayer. God, what am I supposed to do? And I heard open a bank. I'm like, oh no, that is not what I'm going to do. Like, I don't have experience with banking. Like, I've got experience with investing and, I've been securities licensed. I've done all that, but I've never worked in a bank. And I'm like, no, that's what I hear is, no, this is what I have for you. So like, okay, so that's what I've been doing. It's a
And I
long
want to go.
story. So
Oh, but it's very telling. And unfortunately, there are lots of people who go through those types of things. And I want to touch on that. Can you talk about how those types of banking practices exacerbate the wealth gap between white Americans and Black Americans who are trying to start a business or buy a home, things of that nature?
yeah, so well, we know home ownership for one is the way that most people build their wealth in this country.
Mhm.
And when we look at home ownership rates, well, even where I'm at right now, home ownership rates for Black Americans in the Waterloo, Cedar Falls, Iowa area are at like 30, they're under 35%, 32, 33%. Home ownership rates for white Americans is over 70%, like around 72 to 73%. So that right there, I mean, that's a huge gap. And when you also look at, I look at foreclosure rates, all these things,
Mhm.
we are so much more likely to be foreclosed on. And you look at one, access to capital. That when you look at like some of the loans that are offered to our people, they are not the same loans that are necessarily offered to our white counterparts who would have a similar credit history and all the things. Even like when I talk about the white female who ended up buying my business,
Mhm.
So home ownership is huge, and it is the way that, like I said, most Americans will build their wealth. They have um, equity within their homes, and that wealth then is passed down to the next generation. Well, if you either don't have access to capital to get a home, or your home is being foreclosed on. I mean, I've heard so many stories of people doing everything that the bank tells them to do in order to avoid a foreclosure, and they still foreclose on them. My story, if I mean, like I said, a whole lot of prayer and some media connections. If I would not have had that, they could have taken what could be passed down to my heirs, close to $1 million. It's major, it's
Mhm.
absolutely major what home ownership or investing within a business or something of the sorts, that we often do not have access to the funding, not because we aren't worthy or that we have not earned it. I was working with a business owner who has like a 740 credit score, and just last week, and like she was able to get a loan, but the terms that they gave her were absolutely absurd. And I'm like, if she
Mhm.
were a white female with a 740 credit score and the history of running that business, there's no way that would have happened. So between business ownership, home ownership, it's the way that wealth is built in this country, and oftentimes we just shut out from it.
So that being said, because as we just talked about, there are a lot of women and minorities who go through these types of situations. What advice do you have for those who are starting their own business right now amid this political and economic climate that we're in?
Yeah, so this really is a tough climate. It's a really tough climate. I say if there are CDFIs, which would be a community development financial institution
Mhm.
within a person's area, see if they can connect with that type of an institution. Um, you may be able to find some of the community banks that would work with a person, or a credit union. A lot of credit unions don't work with small business owners very well. What people oftentimes don't know is that credit unions are limited by to how much they can loan out to small business owners. So it's much easier and more profitable for them to loan, to a larger small business than to do a whole bunch of small, business loans. And so to reach their cap, a lot of times they'll work with the bigger businesses instead of the smaller ones. But I'd say a credit union over oversight, especially over a larger bank, would probably be really helpful if you are a business that's looking for, I'd say under $150,000 or less. It's probably better to go to either a smaller community bank or a credit union, but I would actually look for a CDFI first.
And in terms of having your ducks in a row before you even take that step, what do people need to have in place before going to the
So,
CFI?
so one of the things that I have found to be an issue, one, people, you got to file your tax returns. So if you don't have the last 3 years of your tax returns filed, get them filed before you actually go to a CDFI, a bank, credit union, whoever. Make sure you do that. The second thing, I mean, if it's a brand new business, have a really solid business plan that also has really solid financials. So a cash flow statement of how, you expect that your income and your expenditures are going to look for a 3-year period. So run those numbers, because, and I always tell business owners, if you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business.
Hmm.
So you really need to be able to sit down with yourself and or business partner, your accountant, whoever, or someone maybe from the Small Business Development Center that you're working with. Sit down with yourself first and then with somebody else, and make sure you have those numbers in order and that you can explain them, because the bank is going to want to know, okay, well, where did this come from? Have you looked at your competition? Like, what are they charging? All of the things that would be outlined in a business plan, but you just have to know your numbers. Because at the end of the day, I will say, you might write a 15-page business plan. what it comes down to is, one, who are the people running the business and why are they qualified to run it? Two, who are your competitors? And three, how are you going to market this business? And then four, the financials. How are we going to get our money back if we loan you some money?
Mhm. And if someone feels that they've done all of those things and they've taken those steps and they're still either getting um, a shady deal or they feel they're being discriminated against, what steps would you advise then to rectify the situation?
So it can be really difficult, and what I find is that a lot of times banks or credit unions will not actually send um, the denial notices that they need to send you. Um, so that was part of our lawsuit against the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau,
Mhm.
because a lot of times it's hard to track the discrimination. So oftentimes they won't send the letters that you need to prove that what they're doing is wrong. They'll just ghost you.
Mm.
Like that, you'll find that, or they'll give you a verbal no, but they won't send the paperwork. So it can be difficult if you can't get that paperwork out of them to show that they really have discriminated against you. Um, you can you can file um, a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and let them know like this is going on, because a lot of times it is really hard if you are just working with that bank, because even if you go up in the ranks, what I found is that the people on the front lines that are doing these things, they're doing them often because that's the culture of that particular organization. So going up the ranks isn't always the way to resolve it, unfortunately. Sometimes you do have to get like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau involved if you know that you are being discriminated against.
Now, I had also read about your years of work in advocacy, and you also teach financial literacy to students. And it got me to thinking about that, the fact that there are a lot of adults right now amidst this economic uncertainty. I mean, we're seeing tariffs, federal and private sector layoffs. What is some of your advice to people in terms of how they can stay solid and possibly grow their nest egg in this current climate on a
Yeah.
personal level?
Yeah. So I'd say just really, I'll say two basic things. Now, I know that the stock market can be like, a, it can make some people nauseated, because their investment risk tolerance is just not there. It can be so uncertain. The volatility right now is great. One day you're up, the next day you are down, and it can be by a lot. So I'm not even going to put that out there for people, even though I think it still is viable. One thing I will say is, if you have your money sitting in a savings account that is earning, point 0.1, point 0.5, take that money out of there. Like, you aren't keeping up with inflation even. Move it into a high yield savings account. You can check with your bank to see if they have a high yield savings account option. If they don't, there are online banks that have high yield savings accounts. You can just Google high yield savings account banks. And one that I've used since, I want to say 2010, so like 15 years. Online bank is Ally Bank, ALLY, so ally.com. And you will get, so much higher of an interest rate. So at least your money should be close to keeping up with inflation in that savings account, and you're actually earning more than nothing. The other thing is life insurance. So I say life insurance not necessarily for the death benefit, although, of course, when we think of life insurance, it is for death benefit. However, there are many living benefits to life insurance. For example, for myself, especially, I mean, my mom has done cash value life insurance since probably before I was born. But once I was so frustrated with the banks after what I went through in 2019, pretty much I started using the cash value of my life insurance policies in order to buy additional properties and things that I wanted to invest in. So look into life insurance. And if you have a medical condition or something where you don't qualify for yourself, you may have, it may be your child or someone else that is close in your family, that, or a grandchild, that you say, I'm going to get a life insurance policy on them. You continue to be the owner of that policy, but you can still get a policy on that child. There are some restrictions on how much, but you can start to build cash value within life insurance. If you think about all the companies that you've ever seen fail or go out of business, I mean, we've seen a few banks that fail.
Mm-hmm.
I can't name for you one life insurance company that has failed. Life insurance companies do
That's
not
very
go out of
true.
business. They don't go
I
out.
can't think of one either.
Exactly. And so, when there's I'm not even going to go into it because there's so much I could just talk about and talk about life insurance, the living benefits of it. But then also, I mean, you want to make sure that for your family, I always say, you know, we have at least a 400-year disadvantage in building wealth. It is hard to catch that up. However, what we may not be able to catch up in terms of saving, people don't save their way to wealth always. I mean, some people, I mean, you invest your way to wealth or you buy your wealth. So, what I can't make up in saving or investing, I am buying for my heirs in life insurance. So, look at those future generations, leave something for the next generation, but also look at the living benefits of life insurance. They are so vast. And like I said, life insurance companies, you don't see them going out of business, and there's so many benefits.
No, they don't. Yeah, and you're
No,
absolutely right.
they
And
do not.
on that note, what are the most common money mistakes that you've seen people make, and how can people avoid them?
Yeah. One is not having an emergency fund. So a lot of times we will get, now paying your bills is important, don't get me wrong, but we will get so tied up into, I got to pay this bill, I got to pay this bill. um, and yes, you do need to pay the bill, especially if it's like your mortgage or whatever. But if it is a debt, I say try and work something out. Like, don't spend your last dollar paying off a debt. Come, like, work something out to make a payment schedule with people. Do not, because you never know. I mean, your furnace could go out, your car, anything could happen. And if you've paid this last dollar on this medical bill that you actually could have payments for, what are you going to do when you come up with an emergency that you really need some money for right now? Like, so make sure that you have an emergency fund. And if you get a bill, especially if it's like a medical bill, um, make sure that you can do a workout, some kind of a plan with them. That is totally fine. Um, and then with that emergency fund, make sure that it's enough. You know, Sometimes we hear, especially if you listen to Dave Ramsey, make sure, you baby step one is $1,000. That is great. But make sure you go beyond that $1,000, because that $1,000 nowadays is not going to take you too far. Look at how much does it cost me to live for, 3 months or 6 months, 3 months especially. So, make sure you've got, if it costs you $5,000 a month to live, make sure you got $15,000 in your savings account. Work towards that. Make it small bites. But I think not having an emergency fund is one, and then sitting your money in the wrong place. Like I said, these bank accounts that are paying, literally, there are some that are paying like 0.05%. What is that? It is an insult. Knowing how banks make money, and we sit our monies in these banks that won't even give us loans, but they're using our money that's sitting there to loan out money, to make money on our money.
Mm-hmm.
Do not sit your money in a bank account like that. Like, that's a huge mistake.
And, speaking of emergency funds and things of that nature, and I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent, but I wanted to get your thoughts on this. I was reading an article talking about how the ultra wealthy in the United States are scrambling to open up Swiss bank accounts, to move their money out of the country, basically, in fear of what could happen under this administration. Do you think that's a harbinger of what's to come for maybe upper middle to wealthier people? And if so, what does that mean for your average citizen? That this is a trend that we're seeing right now?
Yeah. So what it means for our average citizen, I would say, is a slower economic growth. So when we have wealthy individuals moving, 30 million, $100 million outside of the country into Swiss bank accounts or, other countries, that really affects the growth of our economy. And this money that they're moving, it could be out of stocks and different things that if you are in the stock market, which now trust me, I've got money in the stock market, so I'm not anti-stock market, but you may see your accounts really volatile or going down because you've got wealthy individuals moving large sums of money out of the markets. So it is something to look out for in terms of slower economic growth, but then also inflation, which we're also seeing right now. So the price of your everyday goods like going up, unfortunately, because of scare from tariffs and people moving the money. They're getting out of here. And why they're afraid that the new administration may put some restrictions on money movement, which is a possibility. And if you've got large amounts of money, you want your money to be able to be very fluid. And so regulations within the banking system that could come about. What I'm seeing though with the banks is that they're really doing a lot of deregulation. So, which can be
Yeah.
very scary for our average citizens because the more banks are deregulated, the more or the less we're protected. Yeah. So I say for the average citizen, just making sure that, like I said, you've got that emergency fund because you will see costs of all the things going up, especially when you're seeing large amounts of money moving away from this country.
And just to wrap up, I feel like a common theme that I'm getting from listening to all of your wonderful advice is make your money work for you. Can you talk about why that needs to be everyone's mantra, regardless of what economic bracket you're in?
Absolutely. The biggest thing is we have 24 hours in a day. And if we are only working for money, then it really limits our potential for economic growth and to really grow wealth. Our money needs to be working whether we're working or not. So, money, it's a partnership that you have to look at it with money. Like money has to work for you as hard as you're working for it. And so whether that be, well, the other thing is having some second stream of income. So, if you may have your primary job, great. I don't care if it's a hobby where you're doing some t-shirts or, some online business. I don't know what it is, but make sure you have a second source of income because even when you look at all of the jobs that have been lost, if the people who have lost their jobs, if that job was the only monies that they had coming in, they are scrambling probably in an environment where there's a lot of competition for people who are looking for work. So, having a second stream of income, hopefully that second stream of income is something that you are not working too terribly hard for. Something that maybe it's online where you are selling, because I did this for a while and I thought it was great, where I sold products online, but it was drop shipped by another company. So when people ordered all the time where I did not have to be hands on at all. I designed the products, people go online, they buy the products, they are designed and drop shipped by, another company, and I was still making money. So having your mind, your thoughts, your ideas, and your money working for you is is huge. You cannot depend on one source of income.
Very true. And I think we'll wrap there again. ReShonda, thank you for coming on. And for those of you watching and or listening, I want to know, comment down below, what are your thoughts about this current economic climate? And do you have any tips and tricks of your own to help people stay financially solid? And if you like this kind of content, news, politics, and current trends, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.